Once upon a time, one man spent large portions of his free time binge playing Kerbal Space Program. This series is the result. Hello everyone, I am Peppino here playing Kerbal Space Program. And right off the bat, the first thing I decided we are going to do with this series is try and make an awesome base on Minmus. So what I have done is I've put together a couple parts to the Minmus base, and I have tested them somewhat here on Kerbin. And so I have all these things built in different sub-assemblies, which are really handy, that you see me putting together here, along with a launcher I've built. And basically, the plan is going to be to start off by putting all these different sections of this base on Minmus, and then docking them all together, and putting some crew there, and rovers, and lots of other things. So, anyway, what we saw me constructing there was the science lab section, but the first thing I'm actually going to launch is the housing section. I plan on having 2 of these at the base, so we're going to have to do this launch twice. And each one can house 10 Kerbals, and here we'll zoom in and eventually get a little better look at it. What I've basically done is constructed a couple different sections of this base that are all roughly the same size and can be launched by this one launcher and put on the surface of Minmus with these space cranes that I'm using. And so pretty much every launch I've done so far in this series that I've played so far, I've used the exact same launcher. And we're pretty much going to be using this launcher for everything because it's really nice. I just created it as a sub-assembly, and it can take a pretty good payload up into orbit. And as we'll see here, it can actually take this much weight all the way to Minmus. So here we see we are circularizing, trying to get in orbit, and I didn't quite burn enough, so I had to compensate by burning straight up almost for a bit to raise our apoapsis. But then we are able to bring it around and get a nice stable orbit there. So we move on to the launch of the second section. And here we have Hadzer and Luke Kerman taking this launch, and they both appear a little bit scared, but that's alright, they'll be fine. And so we see the stages separating. Everything pretty much in this whole series is going to be done at like 4 or 8 times time acceleration, just because I'm doing very big missions in this series, and basically it takes me a long time of playing to actually get one episode worth of content. So if I didn't have it at like 8 times time acceleration, there would either be like 20 episodes where I could put it in like 5 episodes, or every episode would be like an hour long. Anyway, here we have a little bit of trouble as these 2 stages have actually completely broken apart. So as you can see, I'm throttled down and the engine is still going full speed. We have no control over this engine at all. All we can do is basically try and steer it so that it takes us somewhat closer to orbit rather than basically crashing us back into the atmosphere. So we're pretty much running on an out of control engine there for a while, and we managed to actually steer it enough that it didn't completely screw up our mission. We will still be able to get into orbit using the space crane stage that was supposed to actually take us to the surface of Minmus. And so this launch is kind of stuck there for a little bit. Once we get him into orbit, we move over to our first stage again that still isn't broken. And we are burning for an encounter with Minmus with these guys. And we'll leave the other guys in orbit for now until we figure out a solution of what to do with them, because I don't know that they quite have enough fuel to make it to Minmus and land safely. So we may want to send up an extra fuel tank for them or something like that. But anyway, here we go. We are very close to getting our Minmus encounter with our first housing stage of our base. And there we go. We're right about there. Just gotta burn a tiny bit more. And I will talk a little bit more about this series' long-term goal. It is basically I don't have one. I'm just going to be doing pretty much whatever missions come to mind. The first thing I want to do is get a base on Minmus that is awesome and that we can do a bunch of cool stuff with. And after that, I really don't know. Maybe some interplanetary stuff, starting with that. Bases on other planets and things like that will definitely happen at some point in this series. But the first few episodes, like I said, are focused on Minmus. The reason that I'm going to do that is basically because Minmus is really close to Kerbin and has really low gravity, which means it takes hardly any fuel to do anything. So you can actually pretty much do whatever you want on Minmus within reason. And it's a lot easier than doing things other places. Basically because you can get there with so little fuel. So we finally ditch our launcher stage there, and now we are using the space crane stage that is meant to handle this. And so we're going to just set up some maneuvers and do some slight corrections to our orbit to get it more equatorial. And you'll see, look at how little fuel we actually have to burn to do like complete changes to our orbit like that. That kind of stuff is the reason I chose Minmus. And the other thing is I've built these sections of this base, and they're pretty large. This is a fairly ambitious project that I've undertaken, so I feel like Minmus will be a pretty easy place to do it. And so that's, again, one of the main reasons I've chosen Minmus. And we've chosen our landing destination now. It is this big frozen lake type thing here in this valley on Minmus. That seems like definitely the best place to put a base just because it's nice and flat, and there's going to be a lot you can do there, considering we have to eventually roll all these pieces of the base together. As you can see there, and you'll see more when it lands, what this is going to do is it's going to basically turn into a rover that is an entire section of our base. And we can wheel all of them together and move the entire base around if we needed to, and stuff like that. So I think it could be a pretty cool concept, and I'm excited to see what else I can do. And if you guys have any suggestions for things I should add to the base, I would definitely love to hear them. Note though, I do have quite a few episodes in the future played, and I just have to record them all with the sound and edit them all together and things like that. So that'll take a while. But yeah, I will eventually get to hopefully doing some suggestions for cool things, and you'll be able to see more what I'm doing here in a little bit once I get the other pieces up and get them docked together. But here we see Philemon and Gusmal are going to be the first Kerbals to land on Minmus in this save file at least. And we're bringing it down. The other nice thing about Minmus, if you don't know, is it's like the easiest place to land pretty much ever. I mean, Gilly's a little bit easier, but it's a lot harder to get to. Minmus is very, very easy to land. I'm hardly having to give any power with these engines to land a pretty heavy craft. This would be a lot more difficult on any other body, basically. But here we go, bringing it down nice and slow, hoping not to pop any of the rover wheels. But the main reason we sent crew with this because all of these can fly on their own. That's the other thing. You don't actually need any crew to fly this stuff, as we see here with our space crane stage as we detach it and realize that our control thing was facing the wrong way, which was a bit confusing at first, but managed to figure it out and eventually get ourselves put into a somewhat normal orbit. But the problem is we went the wrong way again because of our control thing being messed up. But I decided rather than correcting it and wasting all that fuel, let's just put it into orbit. Because we really don't need it. I think I eventually end up deleting it at some point. But anyway, it's interesting to watch it fly over the surface of Minmus. Minmus is also just a very pretty planet, or moon, I should say. So that's another good reason to choose it. And once we get that into a nice, easy orbit, we can shift back and take a look at our base section down on the surface. But we just want to get our orbit up just a little bit more, and there we go. Now, we start really far zoomed out for some reason, but we eventually zoom all the way in, and we can take a look at our base. And now I begin to roll it around, and it's a bit unwieldy at times. Remember, you're also watching this in like 4 or 8 times time acceleration. But anyway, it really isn't difficult. It's just very slow. Which is alright, I guess, because it doesn't need to be fast. But anyway, we get Gus Maul Kerman out, and he is the first Kerbal to set foot on Eve. And then eventually we can put him in the housing section there. And now we can take a look actually at what our base will look like. And this is it, pretty much. We can take a look out the windows, and it looks pretty cool, I think. I like this cockpit a lot, and also it's fun to kind of drive around in that view. But anyway, we can also take a look out these windows and see what the Kerbals will see from their rooms where they'll be staying. But anyway, we still have the second housing section up in orbit, but we are going to go ahead and first launch the science lab section, which is what you saw me designing with sub-assemblies in the beginning. I didn't show all of them because I felt like that would be kind of a waste of time, because it's basically just me selecting different sub-assemblies and putting them together. I just wanted to show you guys that kind of construction method. And we'll definitely be taking a closer look at how these things are built a little later. But for right now, I want to focus on just getting as many pieces up to Minmus as possible. Alright, so there we see, since nothing goes wrong while setting up our orbit, we're able to move all the way out on a trajectory to encounter Minmus. And here we go, warp all the way up to our encounter, and once again, just slow ourselves down enough, which doesn't take a ton of fuel. Slow ourselves down enough to get a nice orbit around Minmus, and then we'll be able to correct that and bring it in for landing as close as possible to the first section of our base. And then we can dock them all together, and you guys can sort of see how we're going to be setting everything up. So again, just minor orbital corrections that only take like a second or two of burning each time. And then we just got to bring our orbit all the way down. There we go. And yeah, it's really, really nice. I'll stress it again as we, oh yes, I remember. I time warped way too fast and missed like 4 or 5 revolutions around Minmus. Eventually, though, I became competent and figured it out. But, no, what was I saying before? Oh, and again, I burn in the wrong direction. Here's where I become competent, though, and we're able to successfully land it. Oh, but no, I will I remember what I was saying before. I will say again, if you want to be very effective playing Kerbal Space Program, build yourself a very good launcher that can launch a heavy payload and save it as a subassembly, and then just use that to launch everything, because that makes everything so much easier and it cuts your construction time of all of your ships way down, and it just basically makes everything much more efficient. How I actually designed these sections, as I bring this one in for landing, is I built all of them in the spaceplane hangar as rovers and tested them, actually docked them all together on Kerbin to make sure that they worked, and after doing all of that, I saved it as a subassembly and transferred it over to the vehicle assembly building, where I could put it on top of my launcher and then send it to space, which you saw also earlier. So here we go, we bring this down finally, nice and safe, and then again we've got to put our space crane back into orbit. This time we remember to switch where we are controlling from, so that we can get into an orbit the correct way. So here again we just watch it fly gracefully over the surface of Minmus, which I still find enjoyable to watch. Hopefully you do as well. And then after that we'll be able to go down and actually dock together the two sections of our base. First thing we gotta do is retract the solar panels, just because we don't want to risk breaking them. And then also we will turn in a 90-degree position so that we know exactly how to line up as we drive in. Now remember, this is sped up very quickly. We're going like 2 meters per second, 3 meters per second tops on these things, and I even had to skip all of it just because I didn't want to waste your time watching it roll over the surface. But anyway, yeah, these move very, very slowly, is what I'm trying to say. If you're trying to do something similar in the future, just be prepared for that. But the slow movement means they're very easy to control, and docking them is no problem. And we kind of crab shuffle our way sideways here, and we can introduce the next two crew members who came with the science lab, and they can go get out and go chill on the surface of Minmus. And I think this guy, oh yes, I remember, he's going to plant a flag. I found some interesting flags. This one, as you'll see, is a picture of President Obama asking a young child not to touch his Legos. So there's that. I believe my first flag that I sent up with the other guys was just a normal KSP flag, but that one was a little more interesting. And anyway, we're coming in to plant the normal flag now to celebrate the first two parts of our base joining together, and that is where we are going to end this video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we'll tune in to see what other things we are going to do, because we've got lots of big things planned here for the future of this series. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you all next time, as we get a little bit of lag, but then we plant our normal Kerbal flag, and there we go. So we'll name it Minmus, and then we will return him to his cockpit, and I will see you all next time.